was chaos, frustration, and technical problems at an ethics hearing for former Governor John Hickenlooper. But the biggest issue was he didn't show up. In order for Colorado to move in the right direction when it comes to addressing racism, the whole state needs to be included. But a lot of times, rural Colorado is left out of the conversation. A week of marching, mourning, furious pleas for change, and clouds of tear gas captured through the lens of a photographer. An artist dedicated a memorial to George Floyd in Denver, but they don't want you to see it at street level. So if John Hickenlooper was trying to avoid the attention of an ethics hearing, well, it went terribly wrong today. Colorado's Independent Ethics Commission has found Hickenlooper in contempt for not appearing today. That is despite a subpoena. Now, within the last half hour, a judge granted an order to enforce that subpoena and force him to testify. Today's hearing was to determine if the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate received illegal gifts while governor. So one of the reasons he didn't want to show up was the web-based format, which turned out to be a mix of chaos and frustration because of technical issues and the absence of Hickenlooper. Here's Marshall Zellinger.
So the governor will appear through counsel at this hearing, but he will not appear personally.
This is how the Independent Ethics Commission hearing began, with former governor and current Democratic Senate candidate John Hickenlooper refusing to comply with the subpoena to appear. 6 hours later, after the Colorado Attorney General's office filed this motion to have a judge enforce the subpoena, Hickenlooper changed his mind. Kind of.
The governor will accept and comply with the commission's subpoena. I cannot produce him today. I could definitely produce him on the 16th.
Hickenlooper fought this web-based hearing, which is to determine if he received illegal gifts of travel, meals, and accommodations while governor. One reason he didn't want to participate, technical snafus, and there were quite a few.
We're getting feedback and we're not muted. So I'm going to circulate my conference number.
Let me just put you on hold for a second.
Let me apologize. I
can't hear
literally someone could mute.
Once again, if you have called in, please mute your phone.
That was all before the opening statement, which was briefly interrupted on screen by the appearance of a participant named Turd Ferguson, named for an alias made famous on Saturday Night Live. At times, this had the feel of an SNL skit.
Not sure whose dog that is, but the exhibit should be up for everyone to see.
By the afternoon, 2 witnesses had successfully testified, and then Hickenlooper offered to appear on June 16th.
I would have been much happier had I heard respondents' counsel say the governor has reconsidered and will be here this afternoon.
And this feedback by a commissioner who was appointed by Hickenlooper.
By failing to honor the subpoena of the commission, the respondent has indicated a disrespect for the rule of law, disrespect for the commission, disrespect for the process.
Tomorrow morning, the commission will begin by discussing what kind of punishment Hickenlooper should get for violating the subpoena and not testifying. One of the things they talked about was potentially striking all of his defense and saying, we heard from the other side, and we'll just make our decision off of that. They also will talk about potential fines for delaying the process and wasting people and lawyers' time. That will take up the discussion tomorrow, and Hickenlooper may just appear tomorrow, and it could all be moot. That brings us to our next question. It's a next question from a viewer named Steve. Steve wants to know, what's the worst that could happen to Hickenlooper if he's found guilty of an ethics violation? This is separate from the subpoena. This is if the commission finds him guilty of these potential ethics violations, and the punishment is twice the amount of money than the benefit that the commission decides he got. So let's say they think the flight was X amount of dollars, let's call it $1,000. They could punish him $2,000. But if you add up all of the stuff, it could be a lot of money, perhaps.
All right. People still figuring out the mute on video chat. Thanks for that, Marshall. Appreciate it. So it hasn't really been a great week for the Denver Police Department. On Tuesday, an officer was fired after posting a photo of himself and fellow officers in riot gear with the caption, "Let's start a riot." Now another DPD officer is in trouble, suspected of DUI. Sergeant Bryce Jackson was arrested last night after getting through a road closure and then driving up to the scene of a fatal crash on I-25 in Arapahoe. Greenwood Village police say Jackson seemed drunk and open containers of alcohol were found inside his unmarked unmarked patrol car. He also had his gun on him. Jackson was off duty at the time, and now he's off patrol pending investigation. So today, the debate started at the state capitol over a bill aimed to increase police accountability. So this is going to be requiring, if passed, body cameras for all officers. If an officer pleads guilty or is convicted of using inappropriate force, would be immediately fired and their certification would be revoked. So that way they can't get another job at a different department. It's also requiring an officer to step in if they think a fellow officer is using too much force. So we've heard from other law enforcement talking about how unhappy they are with this bill. But today, the Douglas County Sheriff took more of a middle-of-the-road approach, saying some of it's doable, some of it's not.
We oppose a number of things inside this bill. There are so many different things that it would be impossible for us to say, yes, we support this bill or we oppose it unilaterally. We do believe that there needs to be some things that we can correct and change and improve upon. And we want to do that. And we think that there are some opportunities here. But there are a number of things that would make it incredibly difficult for law enforcement across the state of Colorado, as diverse as we are in a population and geographically made up, that would be difficult for law enforcement to function under some of these restrictions.
So you might remember last year, Sheriff Spurlock went against fellow law enforcement when it came to the red flag bill. He supported the bill that allows for the temporary seizure of firearms from gun owners. That is, if law enforcement or family can show that they're an imminent threat to themselves or others. The family of Marvin Booker wants his case reopened, but it's not going to happen unless there's new evidence. Mayor Michael Hancock said live on our air last week that Booker was murdered by deputies at the Denver jail 10 years ago. The mayor's office has since tried to walk that statement back, saying he meant that Booker, Michael Marshall, and Jessica Hernandez were killed by officers. Booker's family sent a letter to the district attorney in Denver yesterday asking her to reopen this case. The DA's office says they can't do that and said a grand jury already investigated his case and they can't ethically file new criminal charges without new evidence. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, silence fell over a part of downtown Denver today. It's how long a former Minneapolis police officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck. Denver's mayor and other local leaders helped put together a special tribute today, and that included planting an oak tree in Civic Center Park in honor of Floyd and other victims of police violence. So in order to move in the right direction when it comes to addressing racism, it can't just be pockets. It's got to be the whole state. And recently, a lot of the conversation has been dominated by urban Colorado. But people in rural Colorado, they're dealing with racism too, along with more isolation. They're also putting in a lot of hard work to bring about change.
It's a little bit more difficult depending on where you are in a rural community to even be in proximity to Black people or people of color. And so the struggle and the stereotype that then happens is because there are so few Black people or people of color, these are communities that don't care about the issue. And that is absolutely a stereotype.
So Dr. Anita Mosby-Tyler with the Equity Project said that is a stereotype that needs to be broken down. That way rural Colorado doesn't become an audience to what's happening in the metro area. This is a topic that deserves a whole lot more time and discussion. So we are working on some more stories that includes profiling people in rural Colorado working to address this issue. So yesterday, we ran a story about children at the protest and what they need from the community to feel safer. We also shared a story about a mom who knows that she needs to talk to her kids about racism. Well, a few people were really riled up by this, saying that kids shouldn't be involved in an adult situation and just to let them be kids. Listen, parenting is obviously highly personal, but yesterday the parents we did talk to said they're not hiding from an ugly reality. They want it changed for their children's future. For some families, they don't have a choice. They need to discuss racism so that their kids are prepared. They're trying to teach their kids right from wrong and to stand up for themselves. So in full transparency, I cannot relate as a parent because I'm not one. But I can relate as an Indian American woman. And I remember the moment I realized that some people were looking at me differently because of my skin color, and I was a child. That's how I know kids are experiencing racism. So my motto has always been perspective, right? There is this wide range of how people are reacting to what is going on right now. Some people, they are ready to march the streets, others posting on social media, and some are having some really tough conversations with their kids and trying to educate themselves. And this is a time where we can all pause. We can think, where do we land on that rage? Where do I still need to learn about, listen to each other? Because that is a whole lot better than attacking someone because you simply don't understand where they're coming from. Lawmakers want to make sure that when Coloradans are trying to protect themselves during another pandemic or rebuild their lives after the next natural disaster, that businesses cannot make them pay a premium for it.
The contrast between the calm demeanor versus the aggressor just really stood out for me. And I thought that I gotta take this shot.
A week of protests through the viewfinder of a local photographer. Next. Take a look at your summer plans. The state announced this afternoon pools and indoor gyms can reopen with limitations. They're going to have to limit their capacity to 25% or 50 people at the most allowed. Those groups are going to have to stay 6 feet apart from each other. But hey, I mean, not everything is back to normal yet. The state is strongly encouraging people to limit their pool activity to swimming laps. Houses of worship will also be allowed up to 50% capacity or no more than 50 people for in-person worship. So Colorado processed the most tests it has in a single day yesterday. The state crossed the 8,000 threshold for the very first time, processing nearly 8,300 tests. You know that gutting feeling when you go to buy something and realize that the prices have been spiked? Well, lawmakers are trying to say enough is enough, and we're finally getting a few more details on a bill being introduced at the state legislature that's addressing price gouging. They're hoping it's going to strengthen state laws that are already in place and then list specific items that businesses cannot increase prices for during an emergency.
Medical supplies in particular were things that we're really concerned about. Prices of masks being super high. Prices of ventilators. Some people were trying to charge exorbitant amounts for those things, and that should never happen. It also covers rebuilding, building materials, things like that. If there's another disaster like we had with the floods up in Boulder County, we don't want those materials to be raised in price to hurt people that are just trying to rebuild their lives.
If you've already been a victim of price gouging, this doesn't necessarily help you out. There's no compensation or anything like that. It's really more a tool for the Attorney General's office to go after a company behind the price gouging, and it's really going to rely on people reporting these problems to the AG's office.
What a fun weather day. Early this afternoon, we had a line of thunderstorms come off the foothills with wind and lightning and a little bit of rain and super cool clouds out by Sterling this afternoon. That outflow boundary around 1:30 moved through Boulder and came into Denver, producing winds of 60 to 70 miles per hour. And out on the far eastern plains, those storms turned severe. Still tracking them tonight as they show signs of rotation heading into Nebraska and Kansas. Temperatures today back close to 90 degrees. We're back in this territory again tomorrow. Average highs this time of year are in the 70s. So with this next little wave coming through and wind shifting out of the south ahead of it, we've got another warm day coming up. But you know what? It is Friday. And tonight we're looking at a 20% chance of storms and then clearing, our low 59. Sunshine 92, a late day thunderstorm. Better chance of rain from storms on Saturday. A hot day Sunday, and then a nice cooling trend. Temperatures in the Tuesdays and in the 70s next Tuesday and Wednesday. Anusha, and the ladies have it on next today. Welcome back into the studio. So great to see you.
It's good to be back and good to see you, Kathy. Thanks for that. When you walk by a building on Colfax that happens to be right next door to the Denver Police Department's 6th precinct, you're not going to notice it. But there's a tribute to George Floyd that is not visible at street level. And that in itself is telling a story. On Monday, the 1-week anniversary of Floyd's death, Kenny Hughes and Tommy Nahulu collaborated on a portrait of Floyd. This is after the two of them watched their area of Colfax turn violent over the weekend. They wanted to show solidarity with those protesting peacefully and the message they were trying to spread.
I'm trying to bring people together for sure, because I'm not trying to cause a fight here. I just want people to realize that we're all people. And everybody deserves the same love on this planet. That's what's most important, is love.
Now that we put this down, it will hopefully be representative of the new change in this area, in everywhere. But at least Denver gets to be part of that.
So why on a rooftop? The artist wanted the painting to be free from vandalism on the street, but it was visible from our Sky 9 helicopter if the protest spilled onto Colfax again. He went to Capitol Hill to document protests against police brutality and racial injustice. What he ended up capturing was the contrast between peace and violence that has come to define the last week in Denver. It's been 1 week since protests over the death of George Floyd started in Denver. 1 week of marching, 1 week of mourning, a week that we will remember for cries for change and clouds of tear gas, pepper spray, and vandalism. It's also a week captured through the camera lens of Julius Garrido.
I'm Julius Garrido. I'm from Denver. I'm a freelance photographer. I've been shooting pictures for about 10 years now. I normally take photos of street life. I travel a lot. I carry my camera wherever I go, recording people's lives, their daily lives, what they're doing. So the most recent photos that I took is I covered basically the protest here in Denver last Saturday, May 30th, and just documenting what I see there and what's happening. And then I happened to chance upon this person who was smoking his cigarette and just casually taking photo of an officer while being pepper sprayed on. The contrast between the calm demeanor versus the aggressor just really stood out for me. And I thought that I gotta take this shot. Coming from the Philippines, where there's like a lot of violence there, I did not expect this to happen. When the cops showed up, I didn't expect any aggression from their side. So I was really surprised to see them take the offense. I will definitely continue taking pictures. This event will not stop me from taking photos and documenting what's happening around us.
An update on your generosity and your feedback. That's next. Before we go, we just have to say thank you to all of you. We challenged you yesterday to donate $5 each to help Civic Center Conservancy's effort to clean up Civic Center Park. You blew that challenge away. Since yesterday's show, more than 3,800 of you have donated $85,000. This is going to go a long way towards repairing damage done to the park and paying for future enhancements. Civic Center's Conservancy is keeping that challenge going with the goal of reaching 5,280 donations by the week's end. So just real quickly here, Danielle wrote in saying, seeing those kids in your story yesterday brought tears to my eyes. What is the world going to look like for them? I think a lot of people are asking that same question and want to keep this discussion going. We'll see you next time.